Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Hebraic Awakening. We are going to study the Book of Lamentations, the funeral procession for a living nation. We have officially entered into our biblical fourth month, right? So we have also enter into the time of fasting, the fast of the fourth month, which you can find in Zechariah 8 and 19. We have several cultural fasts. Are they biblically mandated fasts? No. They are important cultural fasts, all right, tied to very important historical events that have happened to our people. So for me, it's a no brainer to study them and to even participate in the fast. You could consecrate, you could dedicate time during this month, during the day, just to commemorate the tragic events of the siege of Jerusalem, losing our temple, and going into exile. All right. So the book of Lamentations, people believe is written by Jeremiah, although people saying it's just eye accounts, of what was happening. However, we know that Jeremiah did do Lamentations, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the actual name, the Hebraic name of the book is Ikah. How? Now, this could be said as a question or an exclamation, right? It really means ordered grief, all right? So, we are about to have a funeral procession, an actual funeral procession for a nation who is still alive, right? And that's just unheard of, but it is true in our Hebraic way of thinking, all right? So, a poetic response to the Babylonian siege and the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, this is usually read during Tish B'Av, but I'm starting now because the siege started during this time, all right? So we're going to take a deep look at the widow, which is described as Jerusalem, the city, and the funeral for a living nation because all of her inhabitants is being exiled and carried away into captivity. How can this be? We are scattered across the four corners of the world, so we can relate, all right? We are scattered, those of us who believe that we are blood descendants of the 12 tribes. We're scattered, those of us who have gone when I have gone through slavery, right? But we are descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, one of the most horrific slave trades to date. Now, we know that slavery is still going on, right? Slavery really is still going on. However, when we reference the transatlantic slave trade, there is no other slave trade that is like it. All right. Not in the past, not even in Egyptian slavery. All right. And I don't believe there's ever going to be anything worse than the transatlantic slave trade. All right. So I don't like to compare trauma and grief and all of that, but we have to really drive that point home because our ancestors were chattel. They were not humans, right? So we didn't have human rights. We didn't have that release them after a certain time frame so they can go back home. We didn't have that, right? So, we are separated from our name. We don't know exactly what tribes we come from. We are tracing our lineage as best as we can now, but we 100% cannot say for certain, right? Like 100%. However, those of us that are returning, it is a pulling, it is a yearning, it is Yahweh showing us, you know, by history, by lineage, by so many factors that those of us who believe we are descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. So, we are going to take a closer look at Lamentations because when you look at the Babylonian siege, the Assyrian captivity, all of the captivities, we really can relate. All right. So this book is likened to a kina, a funeral dirge. So a funeral dirge, especially African American history, we understand that, right? This melancholy, solemn song of mourning for the dead. And when we go back in our own history, we understand that. We can relate to the hymns and the chants that were sung. And it is specifically written for the dead, right? The Book of Lamentations, Ikra, is also an acrostic poem, right? It's a poem or word puzzle in which the first letter, syllable, or word of each line spells out a specific word message or the alphabet. So for the Book of Lamentations, there's 5 chapters, all right? 1 through 4 has 22 verses, except, no, 1, 2, and 4 has 22 verses, and chapter 5 has 22 verses, but chapter 3 is the longest with 66 verses, and we'll talk about that in a minute, all right? So each verse has a Hebrew alphabet attached to it. Right? So when you're reading the book of Lamentations from now on, you're going to know that each verse has the Hebrew alphabet attached to it. And because we have been studying our alphabet, we can kind of go further with each verse in what the author is trying to display to us. All right? So acrostic poems are a way for people to process their emotions. Yahweh allows us to express our emotions in a healthy way. And even though we got extreme judgment during this time, he still allowed it. He still allowed our grief. And lamenting is something that we have always done from the beginning to the end. So, Yahweh, even though He is very silent during this time of lamenting, He allows all of the stages of grief to come about. You don't hear Him getting angry. You do not hear Him at all, all right? Because that's what you don't hear. You don't hear His voice at all during this time. So we have 5 stages of this funeral procession. The Book of Lamentation has 5 chapters, so 5 stages, right? And we could take each stage and do the Hebrew alphabet that way, right? With stage number 5 being the pinnacle, the revelation, like the revelation that you're not about to get out of trouble. You're in trouble and Yahweh is not coming to your rescue. So, we could spend hours just going through each letter with each verse, but we are going to leave it, all right, to each of us to do our due diligence to study. I'm just giving you a blueprint, all right? Let's see what I want to make sure we drive home. Um, let's go to the next slide. So we know that Jeremiah practices laments. Let's turn to Second Chronicles chapter 35 and 25. I'm not going to touch the screen because I'm always messing up. Second Chronicles 35 and 25. Let's read it. And Jeremiah lamented for Josiah and all the singing men, so they were men too. And the singing women spake of Josiah in their lamentations to this day, and made them an ordinance in Israel. And behold, they are written in the lamentations. So Jeremiah lamented. All right. Now, the wailing women were usually called to perform the mourning, right? And I want to stress this because we have so much misogynistic and patriarchal hatred towards women that's running rampant in the faith. It is really sickening, and we can see quite naturally that this is the enemy because it takes the women, right, to help build the nation. And when you are constantly beating down your women, your nation is not going to rise. I don't care how much you pray, because they were praying and wailing and bemoaning in the book of Lamentation, and the Most High was quiet, right? He wants repentance. And sometimes you have to go through the judgment, right? Even if you repent, you're still going to get that judgment. You're still going to get the consequence. So you have to wait for the allotted time, right? However, inside of this time frame, you can still be repenting and getting yourself together. So when the punishment, the judgment, the consequence is up, you can go free, right? And you can go about your life with Yahweh, right? So these were not just women who cried out, but they were theological poets. Like these were theologian um, women who understood Torah, understood the nation, understood culture, right? They were healers and they were vocalists. They helped the nation to process trauma, to mourn national disasters and tragic loss. Jeremiah 9 and 17 tells us to consider and call for the mourning women to come, send for the wailing women to come. So we see that this funeral dirge, this procession is really calling for the women to mourn, right? So when we read the book of Lamentations and we open it up, it's not looking good. So let's go to the book of Lamentations just for 1 minute. We're not going to read everything because we'll be here all day. And I got to water these plants out here because it's hot outside in North Carolina. So let's just read a little bit. Lamentations 1. How do the cities sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become as a widow? So it's talking about Jerusalem becoming a widow. She that was great among the nations and a princess among the provinces, how is she become tributary? She weeps sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she have none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwells among the heathen. She finds no rest, right? And all of her persecutors overtook her between the straits. In this chapter, when you continue to read, you will find out that all of the Moedim is put on pause because we have been taken into captivity and the land is now being infiltrated by strangers, right? We don't have a temple because it's getting ready to be, destroyed, taken over. Elohim has left us, his presence is gone, and we are on our own. So that's why when I talk about the Moedims, and I'm going to keep stressing that, I understand why people feel that we cannot keep the Moedims in captivity. So I understand that we cannot keep it 100% correct, all right, like the Bible ask us to do. But because the Moedims are also rehearsals, I feel that we can rehearse, we can remember, and we can do the best that we can. And most people think we're being disobedient. That's not it. We are remembering, right? We are trying to rehearse, trying to tie ourselves back to our culture and our rituals and our cultural practices. We know the feasts, they belong to Yahweh, first of all. And that's something that we have to get straight. These Moedim belong to him. So whether you celebrate them or not, they are still going to be celebrated, right? If you read Jubilees, you know Shabbat and everything is kept in the Shamayims first in the heavens, right? So he is going to celebrate those more deeds. He wants you to participate because he's trying to speak with us during this time, trying to show us Messiah through the Moedim and trying to give us prophetic words through the Moedim as well. So the Moedim are put on pause. It is such a shame because verse 1 is just crazy, right? Verse 1 is just crazy. Um, or chapter 1, I mean, it's just crazy. So let me drive home the wailing women because I really want us to understand that we really got to pray, right? For our nation, those of us that are called to really intercede, to bewail, to cry out, we have to continue to do that. If you ever have done that, because I have, and I'm not going to tell everybody, oh, I was a professional mourner. No, I was not. But one of the giftings that I have is to intercede and to bemoan. And when I was really young, all right, I'm 52. So in my 20s, I really, really did that a lot. Bemoaning and wailing. OMG. You know, every prayer session almost I was crying out, and most people did not understand it. And I'm sure people thought I was just being crazy. However, if you understand a funeral procession, because we're getting ready to talk about that, you understand that it's very loud and vocal, right? And so now that I am gaining cultural understanding of our practices and rituals and traditions, I understand while I was bewailing and moaning, right? Because you cannot play when it comes to right judgment, consequences, and the enemy coming in the gates. The Most High wants to hear us. He wants to hear the intercessors, but sometimes he look down and say, "Where are the intercessors? I don't hear nobody." All right. So wailing women, they were professional, trained, and paid. These were again not just women who cried out. These were professional women like counselors, like grief counselors, right? The funeral procession went on from the place of the family all the way to the burial site. And there were several stops along the way, and they would stop, they would sing, they would chant, they would say words of encouragement. And so these professional women that were paid and trained, right, to help the family and the community to process grief correctly and without embarrassment, without shame. There was loud vocals, there were flutes, right? This was a very noisy event. You know, our funerals, especially over here in North America, our funerals, are very solemn and kind of quiet. We do have some funerals where we see people trying to jump in the casket. Like, we don't understand um, that a lot of that, I truly believe, is just coming out of us because we come from people who bewail and bemoan. Right. And my first time seeing someone like wail and bemoan, it was not the women. I remember in Chicago, we went to the Third Baptist Church of Chicago. I think it's still standing there. Pretty large church, all right, Baptist church. They were smoking in the basement. Now, that's one thing I remember as a little girl. I'm like, what they doing smoking downstairs in the bathroom, in the basement? I'm like, what is they doing? However, my first image of prayer was the men on the moaning bench. So back then, they had a bench where the men got down on one knee and they would bemoan and they would pray and they will cry out, and it was a chant, like, and they will call upon God, but it was like in a chant, like in a song with moaning and groaning. I will never forget it because it was so impactful to me. And I didn't quite understand it, but I felt it. I felt it. And see, all of these seeds, if you go back through your journey, all of these seeds were being planted. And so many of us try to throw away our experiences because we were in Christianity, maybe we were in Islam, whatever. But you had seeds along the way in your life, in your family lineage, that if you continue to learn Torah, the cultures and traditions and the practices of your people, you begin to understand why your people did what they did. So those men were, to me, willing men, all right, that what was it Jeremiah spoke of, right? The men and the women bewailed and bemoaned Josiah. All right. So the wailing women, they teach us, right, how to have structure in order in death. That's what they teach us, a call and response. So this funeral procession in the book of Lamentations, as it is describing the funeral of a living nation, it is not all over the place. It is really structured. However, right, as we're going to see that it gets really unstructured really quickly, right? Let's go now, Lamentations 3. But I think I want to go back to Lamentations 2 because before we could get to 3, because Lamentations 3 is one of the long ones. But Lamentations 2 is why Lamentations 3 is one of the long ones, right? So let's find the verse. Um, Listen, that famine that hit, right? And the siege was taken over because they busted in and broke down the walls because of the famine. And that is a very strategic military thing to do. Anybody would do it. Oh, y'all got a famine? Oh, y'all got a severe famine. Y'all weak? Y'all not eating? Y'all military hungry? Oh, we could just come in and, break down the walls. And that's exactly what happened. It is recorded. Let me make sure I find the verse that the women, so we're just talking about the women. And this is how you know that a nation is destroyed when the women are eating their own children because they are so hungry. Now, instead of the women feeding their children, they end up eating their children. Oh, Father, that right there, this is why the video is taking so long for me to get up because it's too much to grasp. Mothers eating their children. Because I want to find the verse. We in Lamentations 2. I hate to keep typing this in, but we got to find it so you can read it. If you know, you know. But if you don't, I want you to see it. Let's see. I thought I had read. Oh, no, it's not. It's Lamentation. Oh, it's Lamentation 4. Okay, so Lamentations 4. So we'll get to that. I thought it was Lamentations 2. Well, Lamentations 2, let's just read a little bit of it. I'm sorry, y'all. I really thought it was Lamentations 2, but it is Lamentations 4. But let's read 2 because you want to see this progression. All righty. Let's see what we can. Let's start at verse 3. In fierce anger, he has cut off every horn or power of Israel. He has withdrawn his right hand at the approach of the enemy. He has burned in Jacob like a flaming fire that consumes everything around it. Verse 5. Yahweh is like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all her palaces and destroyed her strongholds. He has multiplied mourning and lamentation for the daughter of Zion. Verse 7. Yahweh has rejected his own altar and has abandoned his own sanctuary. He has given the walls of her palaces into the hands of the enemy. They have raised a shout in the house of Yahweh as on the day of an appointed festival. So the way that we get down on the appointed Moedim and festival, that hollering and screaming and dancing and shouting and shofars playing, that's the cry. All right, that's happening in Jerusalem during this time because Yahweh has left the building. He left his altar. He abandoned his sanctuary. He has given the walls of the palaces over to the enemy. It's just, it's crazy when we think of our Elohim abandoning his own altar. That is unfathomable. And this is why we have so much trauma that has really been passed down to us since the time of Adam. That's why you don't transgress the law. I talk about that. Sinning is one thing, missing the mark, making a mistake, getting up, turning around, repenting. But all of the transgression of the law, oh no, you did that. And you meant to do that. And you did it on purpose. Even though somebody warned you, you kept doing it over and over. Transgression of the law. So now we at Lamentations 3 because Yahweh has left the building. And in this book, the wailing of the widow is longer and more chaotic. All right. This poem has 66 verses in it. This is the pinnacle of our suffering. Each Hebrew letter is assigned to each verse. But guess what? It's 66 verses in this one. And it has 3 verses assigned to each Hebrew letter, right? This is intentional. In the middle of chaos, the people are trying to find hope, relief, and order. All right. Because this funeral procession, remember, I said, is structured. It's structured to help you process trauma and grief. However, during this time, the Most High is silent. He not saying nothing. His presence is no longer there. He has left his own altar and sanctuary, and you on your own. And you're trying to process this grief and this trauma, but you can't because Yahweh is not near. When we're grieving and we're going through trauma, and we're processing death, you can feel Yahweh is with you. But in this instance, he said he left the building. So Lamentations 3 is 66 verses. 66. Terrible. Now we get to Lamentations 4. All right. So although chapter 4 goes back to the original 22 verses layout, the intensity continues to amplify. The people are experiencing pain and trauma so bad that they are running out of breath. So we all know, when you do that ugly cry, and sometimes you hyperventilate, that's what this is. And this is the um chapter where the mothers resort to cannibalism. Y'all probably found it by now. Y'all probably found it by now. And we always say, well, we ain't never did cannibalism. Yeah, yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. So sad. Well, why I can't find it? Okay, verse 10. If y'all probably found it by now, I'm being slow today. Verse 10. With their own hands, compassionate women have cooked their own children, who became their food when my people were destroyed. I don't have to look up nothing else, right? Because I was like, I really can't go into the background and the research of the women eating their children. I can't do it. I thought I could, and I started, and I just couldn't. I'm reading, and I'm like, nah, that's okay. I got it. I got it. And I just think about, you know, our ancestors here in America being brought over and all of the horrific things that we have to go through. I have a book now. I bought it. I just have not been able to read it, and I know I have to. Y'all heard of the delectable Negro? Y'all already heard. The cannibalism and homoerotic behavior amongst the slave owners. I don't even know how I'm going to begin reading this. And I really need to talk to myself and say it's for educational purposes. Because some things that you read is so traumatizing. You know, you take a long time to recover from what you just read. I think one of the most horrific things that I have heard during the transatlantic slave trade was how they fed our children to the alligators. That's just, we'll never know all of the atrocities that has happened to our people. However, all of this trauma that is passed down, and you got the Book of Lamentations that's saying, you know what, you can't even grieve right. I know you want to grieve right, but this funeral is wild, right? This funeral is going to go down in the books because you all have lost your natural minds. You have left it somewhere because Yahweh, I'm going to keep driving that home. He has left his own sanctuary. And so by the time we get to Lamentations 5, I didn't even put up a slide for that because Lamentations 5 just totally breaks the order of lamenting. It is not following nothing. It is the pinnacle. I'm talking about the extreme pinnacle. There is nothing, right? Because when you read the end of it, there's nothing. You have a glimmer of hope, I think in chapter 3 somewhere, but it goes right back into, oh, we have really lost our Elohim, right? Our Elohim is no longer with us. And the trauma of what's happening to the people because of the siege. So Lamentations 5, it just breaks protocol and you just crying and bemoaning and wailing, and there is no comfort. There is no comfort. And so now when you read Isaiah, right, you go back to Isaiah, you see the history and the judgment and the writings of everything that was going on. Then you see Jeremiah, where now you're going to get this word. Jeremiah is the one that says, hey, we in trouble. Then you get to Lamentations. What is it? Ezekiel. I'm like, oh no. I don't know how some men and women can read this and still do what they do, as far as all of this hatred toward one another. In the faith. I'm not even talking about in the world. I'm not talking about in the world. I'm talking about in the faith. And if the men understood the wailing women and what we are supposed to be doing, even the men, I'm not just saying it's just for men, but most of the time it is the wailing women. And what we have to do and how we have to pass this down to our daughters to teach our daughters to bemoan and to bewail. Because this is history. Because we got to get to the fast of the 5th month, the 7th month, and the 10th month. Come on, it's just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy because of transgression, not because of sin, right? Because of a mistake that you could just get up and repent and, do your offering. Transgression, like, no, y'all doing stuff on purpose, and I'm giving you a time, and you keep doing, no, no, I'm gone. And so now we have entered into the summer months, which is supposed to be all fun for us, right? We're supposed to be having fun, barbecuing, going out, vacationing. However, history says this is a time of mourning. And I just can't compute that. I'm making plans to vacation and to do and to grow and to be. And this historically is a time of mourning for our people. And I know that we can't sit in shame and embarrassment forever, right? We have to understand the blood of Hamashiach and we hang on that and we know that he has forgiven us and we have a right and we can get up and repent, but still, when you're reading your history and you're researching, you like, man, and the temple fell twice. It happened just one time, y'all. Two times. And we don't got no more temple. It's just tragic. It's just tragic. And so I don't want us to walk away, you know, feeling so hurt and embarrassed and shameful. I do want us to be aware. I do want us to be aware because what's happening in the faith is crazy. And how I cope is that, okay, them your kids, most hey, I'm trying to do my little part that you gave me to do, but them your kids. Okay, they been acting a fool. They been acting a fool. They your kids. And I just have to continue to break curses, teach my family, pray over my family, pray over my nation, pray over the community, be a light, do the things that he is asking me to do. I mean, that's all I can do. But when you look at the totality of our faith, it's like, what in the world is y'all doing? Are y'all even reading? So I hope you will take the time. I know on my Patreon, I am going to put up the fast of the fourth month, and I know people have, issues with dates and times and all of that. Hey, pick a day during the fourth month and set it aside to study, to meditate, to read, to pray, to declare, over our community, over our people, over believers everywhere, whether you are blood descendant or whether you are grafted in, take the time and set it apart. Even if it's an hour. Now you know. And this is why I put certain things on Patreon so we can have a safe place to study this. And we don't have, everybody typing in the comments because they don't want to learn nothing. They just want to act a fool and be a fool. They don't want to just act a fool. They want to be a whole fool. Right. And we know what the Bible says about food. So we want to have a safe place to study. That's why I created Patreon. And I pray that people take it seriously, ask questions, we can have constructive dialogues um, because it's necessary. And people need to learn, how to study and what to study, So I got some more things coming up. But on the flip side, this is the door, right? So I've already done a video on the fourth month, the door, right? And what is Yahweh saying? What do we see beyond the door? So I hope you look at that video. But, you know, this took me quite some time to just digest. It wasn't that this is a whole long, drawn out teaching, but it took me some time to digest because now you can look at the book of Lamentations, take each Hebrew alphabet, and just look at each verse, and you could get a greater understanding of what our ancestors was going through. And you could get a greater understanding of what your ancestors was going through if you are a descendant of the transatlantic slave trade. You could get a really good sense. And so my prayer is that our people, our nation, the nation of believers in the kingdom of Yahweh, that we will stop to really take time to study and not just to have head knowledge, but that it will shift and change the way we think so that our behavior can change, so that we can have love for one another, and that the world will see the love that we have for one another and be like, okay, who people are these and who do they serve? You know, what Elohim do they serve? And we can hold our head up high and say, we serve Yahweh. He is our Elohim. You know, say it with conviction, say it with your chest. The Elohim of Abraham, Ishak, and Yaakov, right? The Elohim of Moshe, Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. Like, say it with your chest. We are descendants and we are believers in the kingdom of Yahweh. And our Mashiach is Yeshua. He is the Messiah. Like, I just pray that and speak that over us. So I hope this has helped you. You know, the book of Lamentations is a heavy book. There is no happy ending. However, it's necessary to read and be aware of the time that we are in. So this is the fast of the fourth month, you know, but there are good things inside of this month. We just need to make sure that we are not repeating these behavioral cycles that got us in exile in the first place. All right. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave it in the Patreon comment section, and I will talk to you all in the next video.